Hi, it's Ursula from ursula-smith.com, and today I just have some quick ideas. I've covered all these topics in previous videos, but this is just slightly different combinations. And so I've talked about this particular thing in two different videos. This is TerraSlate paper, which is laser printable. So I talked about that in another video. It's a little bit thinner than Yupo, so I layered 3 pieces together to make an embossing plate, if you will. And I've talked about that in other videos, but this was just different ideas. So if you have a digital cutter like I do, I cut this cutout, layered it to use as an embossing plate, but I also cut the outline. So now I have the outline, and rather than just layering for a different look, I embossed it. And again, I talked about this in another video. I'll do a quick blog post to link to it, but I also keep playlists so you can kind of search around in there. And so what I did was I embossed this and then just colored over it with Distress Oxide ink. In this case, it was prize ribbon and a little bit of peacock feathers, and then came over the top of it with, I can't remember if it was, nope, brush corduroy. And that's the brownish color in the background. Sometimes I use just straight frayed burlap. Sometimes I add a little bit of tea dye too. So that color combination. So then I also embossed on watercolor paper and just did the normal Distress Oxide Resist, where I come over the top, same 2 colors, prize ribbon and peacock feathers. That's kind of my go-to right now. And then maybe even a little bit of salvage patina, and then the tea dye and what did I just brush corduroy. So just be careful. I think I've mentioned this before on the Tim Holtz / Ranger cardstocks. If you're doing the Distress Oxide Resist, where you do Distress Oxide come over with spray stains, it can run a little bit. But what's nice, since I embossed it first with my little plate, the stain and the running ink tends to pool in the low areas. And, so you don't get as fuzzy an image. And then I've talked about this in another video where you could always, I did this with embossing folders, but the same process is similar. Line it up again, roll it back through, and it will just punch up the embossed detail a bit. So that's that. This is the same idea, except it's plain cardstock, uncoated, office supply cardstock. And then I decided that I did some Photoshop work, took in something I had done, fiddled around with it, did different blend modes, came up with a card, and I was like, nah, I kind of like it, but I'd like it punched up a little bit more, and then even if I wanted to ink on top of it. And but trying to line this up, so this has to go under when you're embossing, and really hard to line up because it can't see through the printed paper. So what I did was I printed twice and then lined up with the bottom and then lined up the cardstock and ran. I ended up running the whole thing through, and it lined up and embossed fine. And so again, I could go over it if I wanted to with more ink. So, and then last, I used this die, and I've done this before. It's different. I don't know where my design went, but used the like molding paste. In this case, it was straight molding paste made by Golden. And I went over it and then just kind of feathered out. So you can kind of see it's a little bit lighter, but I feathered out the molding paste. But this is on Crafts Consortium paper, so it's printed, and it has like gold running through it. It looks like it was probably made from like an alcohol ink project. Really pretty paper to start with. And so then I came over the top with the Sizzix luster wax with, you know, just onto the molding paste areas, and then sprayed like crazy with different colors, pickled raspberry and whatever, flamingo, something flamingo, distress spray stains, not oxide, just spray stains. And it kind of dyed the background of the paper and just kind of made the gold stand out. So just, you know, we've done this technique before, but I've always done it on cardstock, but you can always do it on printed paper as well. So lots of quick ideas, and you can find all the information on all those different techniques on my blog and in my YouTube channel. Thanks for joining me today. We'll see you next time.